In the vast, cold emptiness of space, the Galactic Council held its power in the farthest reaches of the universe. From their immense citadel, located in a distant star system, they ruled over countless worlds, watching with cold detachment as life thrived across the galaxy. The Council, a group of powerful alien leaders, had watched Earth for centuries, dismissing it as a primitive, insignificant planet, too small and unimportant to challenge the galactic order. But today, everything was about to change. The Council's grand chamber was dark, with only the faintest glimmer of distant stars shining through the massive windows. A circular table sat in the center of the room, where members of the Council, beings of varying sizes, shapes, and colors, gathered in silence. At the head of the table stood the leader, a towering figure with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room as the tension in the air grew thick. The Council had gathered to discuss one thing: Earth. For years, they had watched the humans, so insignificant, so primitive. But something had changed. Recent intelligence reports had revealed a shift in the balance of power. The humans, whom the Council had long underestimated, had shown signs of developing technology far beyond what they had ever expected. A new weapon, perhaps, or a new kind of ingenuity. Whatever it was, it had shaken the Council's confidence. The leader of the Council raised a hand, and the room fell into complete silence. "It's time," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "We must act before this threat grows beyond our control. The humans will no longer be allowed to remain unchecked." Murmurs spread through the room, but no one dared to question the decision. The time for hesitation had passed. A council member, a sleek insectoid creature with glowing blue eyes, spoke up, his voice trembling with both excitement and fear. "Are we certain? The humans are primitive. They have nothing we cannot crush with ease." The leader's cold gaze fell upon him. "You underestimate them," he replied sharply. "We have underestimated them for too long. These humans, they are unlike anything we've encountered before. It is not their size that we should fear, but their potential. They have been hiding something, and I intend to find out what." The council member hesitated, but nodded reluctantly. There was no denying the fact that something had changed. Reports of strange, unexplained energy signatures near Earth had been flooding in. Whispers of human inventions, advanced technologies, and mysterious alliances began to circulate. The humans were not as weak as the council had once believed. The leader turned to the vast star map projected above the table. A blinking red dot marked Earth's location, surrounded by a sea of alien ships. "Prepare the fleets," he commanded. "We will strike now, before they have a chance to rise against us." The decision was made. The Galactic Council would send its fleets to Earth. They would overwhelm the planet, crush its defenses, and bring the humans to their knees. It was the only way to secure their power and preserve the galactic order. The humans, in their ignorance, had no idea what was coming. Back on Earth, life went on as usual. Governments and civilians alike went about their daily routines, unaware of the impending doom. The world was peaceful, but fragile. Humanity had made great strides in technology, science, and exploration, but it was still far from the level of the alien races that watched from afar. However, a storm was brewing. At a hidden military base deep beneath the surface of the planet, scientists and engineers worked around the clock, developing new technologies in secrecy. One of these projects was classified as Project Sentinel, a top-secret effort to develop a new kind of warship, one that could stand against any enemy. The project had been shrouded in mystery, with only a select few knowing its true purpose. For years, the world had laughed at Earth's attempts to join the galactic community. Human space exploration was still in its infancy compared to the great powers of the galaxy. But all of that was about to change. In the coming days, the humans would realize the full extent of the Galactic Council's wrath. They would see their world shattered by a force they couldn't comprehend. But what the Council didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that humanity was not as defenseless as they believed. The Galactic Council had declared war, but the humans were ready to show them just how wrong they were. In the silence of space, far from the reach of the alien fleets, a shadow moved. A massive warship, once thought to be a mere myth, was preparing to make its way to Earth. It was something the Galactic Council had never anticipated, something the humans had kept hidden in the darkness for years. The leader of the council stood tall, his voice booming across the chamber. "We are the rulers of the galaxy, and Earth is ours." The fleets began their journey, and Earth, blissfully unaware, waited for the storm to hit. But as the first alien ships left their hidden bases, something else stirred. A presence, silent and powerful, moved in the shadows, a force that would change the course of history forever. The humans might have been underestimated, but they had a surprise waiting for the Council. The massive warships of the Galactic Council advanced steadily through the void, their sleek forms cutting through space with chilling precision. The fleets were unstoppable, giant war machines meant to crush any resistance that dared to rise against their superior technology. From a distance, Earth seemed like an easy target, small, vulnerable, and unprepared for the impending storm. But the truth was far different. Beneath the surface of Earth, in places few had ever even heard of, there was a hidden force. A force that had been waiting for this moment. A force that would challenge everything the Galactic Council believed about humanity. Deep underground, in a facility known only to a select few, a team of human scientists and military leaders stood before the massive, almost mythical warship that would soon join the fight. This ship was no ordinary vessel. It was Earth's greatest secret, built in the shadows of the planet's most secure locations. Its existence had been denied, its purpose misunderstood. The people who had worked on it had dedicated their lives to creating something that could stand against any alien force, and now the time had come to unveil it. Dr. Emily Carson, the lead scientist on Project Sentinel, paced nervously in front of the control room. Her mind raced as the countdown ticked down, signaling the final preparation for the ship's launch. She had always believed in the potential of humanity, but now, as the weight of her mission bore down on her, she wondered if the ship, this colossal marvel of human ingenuity, was enough to save Earth from the coming war. "Ready to launch, Dr. Carson," a voice called from across the room. It was one of her engineers, his face lit by the glow of countless monitors displaying real-time data. Dr. Carson nodded, her heart pounding. "Do it. All systems. Activate." Outside, a massive hangar door groaned open, revealing the full size of the warship. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Sleek, dark, and imposing, the ship was a testament to human engineering. A weapon forged in secrecy, its power was unmatched by any known enemy. It had been designed to fight the impossible, something that humanity, even at its most desperate, had never truly believed they could achieve. But the Galactic Council was wrong to dismiss them. Meanwhile, in space, the alien fleets continued their approach. The Council's ships moved in perfect formation, their commanders eager to wipe the humans from the galactic map. The Council had no idea that the humans had been preparing in secret, and they certainly didn't know about Project Sentinel, the one weapon that could turn the tide in Earth's favor. Back on Earth, the human forces scrambled to prepare for the worst. News of the Galactic Council's declaration of war had spread like wildfire, and panic gripped the planet. Governments tried to reassure the people, but the fear was palpable. For many, the idea of facing such an overwhelming enemy seemed impossible. But some believed, some knew that humanity was more than capable of surviving, even thriving, against a superior enemy. They had learned from their history, from the countless wars they had fought and won. Humanity was strong, resilient, and above all, inventive. Their greatest strength wasn't their weapons or technology. It was their ability to adapt, to learn, and to push forward when the odds seemed impossible. As the clock ticked down, Dr. Carson stared at the ship's control panel, her finger hovering over the activation button. She didn't know what would happen once they launched. Would the ship be enough? Could humanity truly stand up against a force as powerful as the Galactic Council? There was no time for doubt. The ships were coming, and Earth had no choice but to face them. "Launch," she ordered, her voice steady, despite the fear and uncertainty that gnawed at her gut. With a hum of power, the ship's engines ignited, sending a powerful surge of energy through the underground base. The warship began to rise, slowly at first, then faster as it broke through the surface, climbing into the sky. Its shape was sleek and dark, and the sun gleamed off its reflective surfaces. It was beautiful, in a way, a perfect blend of form and function, a symbol of humanity's triumph in the face of the impossible. But as it rose higher, the atmosphere in the control room grew tense. Dr. Carson couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. What would happen next? Would the ship's power be enough to turn the tide? As the ship cleared the Earth's atmosphere, it prepared to enter the void of space. Its mission was simple: to stop the Galactic Council before they could reach Earth. It would take everything humanity had to fight this battle. But with their hidden weapon now in play, there was hope. Hope that the Council had severely underestimated the resilience and strength of the human spirit. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Galactic Fleet, the Council's commanders were unaware of the growing threat. They were preparing for a quick and decisive strike, confident in their overwhelming power. But as their ships neared Earth's orbit, something changed. The first reports came in from their reconnaissance units. An unknown object, a massive warship, was emerging from Earth's surface. The ship was unlike anything the Council had ever encountered, and it was closing in fast. "Report," the Council leader demanded, his voice filled with a rare hint of uncertainty. We don't know, sir," came the response from his lieutenant, his tone laced with fear. "It's human, but it's unlike anything we've seen. It's moving at a speed we can't track." A ripple of shock spread through the Council's leaders. They had assumed Earth was helpless, defenseless against their fleets. But now, a human warship, something previously thought to be a myth, was barreling toward them. "What is it?" the leader growled. The lieutenant hesitated for a moment before speaking again, this time with a mix of awe and fear. "It's a human warship, a massive one, and it's coming straight for us." The Council leader's eyes narrowed. Something had shifted. Earth was no longer the easy target they'd thought it was, and the war that had seemed so inevitable was now anything but certain. As the human warship surged toward the heart of the Galactic Fleet, the tension on both sides reached a fever pitch. In the depths of space, the vastness of the conflict was more than just a physical battle. It was a test of willpower, ingenuity, and courage. The ship, now fully out of Earth's atmosphere, cut through the stars with a grace that belied its intimidating size. On board, Dr. Emily Carson and the military commanders watched the unfolding events through a screen filled with digital data. It was their last hope, and they knew it. "Prepare for engagement," the fleet commander, Captain James Sullivan, ordered. His voice was calm, but beneath the surface, the weight of the moment was clear. This was their first true chance to show that humanity could hold its own in a galaxy that thought of them as nothing more than a speck of dust. The first wave of galactic warships began to form a massive blockade. The Council's fleets were enormous, their weapons far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. Thousands of ships, each bristling with weapons, began to converge on the approaching human warship. Dr. Carson felt her stomach tighten as the first shots from the enemy began to streak through space, targeting the warship. The blasts illuminated the dark expanse like fireworks. Their firepower was overwhelming, designed to obliterate anything in their path. But the human warship, Project Sentinel, was not just another ship. It was humanity's final answer, a testament to the brilliance of Earth's best minds. "Brace for impact," Captain Sullivan shouted, as the ship's shields flickered to life, absorbing the brunt of the first strike. The warship shuddered violently as the Council's weapons hit, but it didn't break. Shields holding steady, one of the engineers called out, "Hull integrity at 85%. We can take more." The The human crew let out a collective breath, but their relief was short-lived. The Galactic Council's ships were closing in fast, their weapons ready to strike again. The human ship was outnumbered, outgunned, and yet it had something the Council's fleet did not: the element of surprise and a determination to win no matter the cost. Captain Sullivan watched the radar as a new wave of enemy ships appeared, the Council's battle tactics becoming more aggressive. "Deploy countermeasures," he ordered. A series of smaller drones shot out from the human warship, cloaking themselves and disrupting the Council's targeting systems. It was an old trick, one Earth's military had perfected during their wars on their home planet. The aliens weren't prepared for the unpredictability of human warfare. Outside, the battle raged in full force. Alien warships fired relentless barrages, but the human warship danced around them, its movements almost unnatural, as if guided by something more than sheer luck. It was as if the ship knew exactly how to avoid destruction at every turn. Back in the control room, Dr. Carson looked at the ship's trajectory on the digital map. The human warship was positioning itself for a powerful strike, one that would take everything the ship had. She exchanged a quick glance with Captain Sullivan, who was also calculating the risk. "Ready?" he asked, his voice unwavering. "As ready as we'll ever be," Dr. Carson replied. "Let's show them who they're really up against." With a sharp movement, the human warship adjusted course, locking onto the closest galactic ship. The warship's engines flared, propelling it toward its target with frightening speed. A burst of energy shot from its weapons, tearing through the alien ship's shields before slamming into its hull. The impact was catastrophic. The alien ship, much larger than the human warship, shuddered, its outer layer disintegrating in a massive explosion. The Council's fleet commander, watching from his flagship, felt the tremor of the explosion ripple through his own ship. "Impossible," he whispered under his breath. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were not supposed to have this kind of firepower. They had underestimated humanity at every turn. And now, they were paying the price. The rest of the Council's fleet began to react, panic spreading like wildfire. The humans had breached their defense, and they hadn't even begun to reveal all their secrets. The Galactic Council was no longer in control. The human warship, powered by a mixture of old-world ingenuity and advanced technology, had become the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. As it tore through the chaos of space, it was no longer just a ship, it was a symbol of everything humanity had worked for, a message to the galaxy. Humanity would not back down. They were not weak, and they were not to be underestimated. But as the human warship continued its assault, the Council commanders rallied their fleets, now in full desperation mode. They had no choice but to retaliate with everything they had. The humans had pierced their armor, but they hadn't won yet. The battle continued to rage, with each side refusing to give an inch. The Council was strong, but the humans had proven one thing. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future, their home, and their very place in the galaxy. And they wouldn't stop until the last alien ship had been destroyed. The battle raged on in the cold expanse of space, and with each passing moment, the humans' fight for survival became more intense. The once confident galactic fleet was now scrambling to adapt, reacting to the humans' unpredictable tactics and formidable technology. The Council's ships were massive, powerful, and capable of wreaking unimaginable destruction, but they lacked the heart, the raw determination, and the ingenuity that humanity brought to the fight. As the human warship continued to weave through the hostile waves of alien fire, Captain Sullivan, standing at the command center, glanced over at Dr. Emily Carson. The tension in the air was thick, but there was something else too, an unmistakable sense of resolve. "We've hit them harder than expected," Sullivan muttered, his fingers tapping rapidly on the control panel. "But this won't be over easily. We need to press forward. We need to show them that Earth can stand toe-to-toe with the greatest fleets the galaxy has ever seen." Emily nodded, staring at the screen. They had inflicted severe damage on several ships, But the enemy was relentless. The fleet commanders of the Galactic Council were quickly regrouping, repositioning, and preparing to unleash a full assault on the human ship. It was only a matter of time before their overwhelming numbers would win out. But Emily wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. We can't stop now. We've surprised them once, but we need to keep them guessing. If we show weakness, they'll exploit it. We'll need something else, something they can't predict. Captain Sullivan turned toward his chief engineer. What's the status on the experimental weapon systems? The engineer glanced nervously at the display, showing their dwindling power reserves. We're low, Captain, but we can charge the hyperpulse cannon one more time. It'll be a long shot, but it's our only chance. Sullivan took a deep breath. The hyperpulse cannon was their last resort, a weapon that could disrupt the entire fleet if fired correctly. But the energy it required was immense, and after the earlier attacks, their power reserves were dangerously low. It was a gamble. We don't have a choice, Sullivan said. Charge it. We'll hit them with everything we've got. As the crew scrambled to prepare the cannon, Emily watched the battle unfold. The alien ships were closing in, forming an impenetrable wall around the human warship. The humans had taken out several ships, but it wasn't enough. The sheer might of the Council's fleet was beginning to suffocate them. Yet Emily held on to the hope that this was far from over. She looked out the viewport, staring at the darkness of space. Something deep within her told her that humanity had something the Galactic Council wasn't prepared for, a sense of unity, of desperation, and of unyielding hope. We're ready to fire, Captain. The engineer's voice brought her back to reality. All systems aligned? Sullivan asked. All systems go, came the reply. Then fire. A massive burst of energy shot from the human warship, lighting up the surrounding space. The hyperpulse cannon blasted through the alien fleet like a raging storm, cutting through their shields and tearing through their hulls. The Council's ships began to break apart in waves, their once impenetrable defenses now useless against the overwhelming might of the human weapon. For a moment, everything stood still. Silence reigned as the last remnants of the enemy ships burned in space, their once proud forms disintegrating into nothingness. But the calm was short-lived. The Galactic Council's commanders, angered and panicked, began to regroup. They were stunned by the humans' power, but they weren't finished yet. The Council was vast, and their fleets were numerous. It would take more than one shot to defeat them all. Prepare for counterattack. The fleet commander of the Galactic Council barked, his voice cold with fury. We will crush them for this humiliation. But even as the commander shouted orders, his ships were already struggling to regroup. The humans had done something they hadn't anticipated. They had shaken the Council's confidence. The tide was shifting. Humanity had not only survived their first wave of destruction, they had fought back harder than anyone had expected. Back aboard the human warship, Captain Sullivan knew that this was just the beginning. The battle had taken a turn in their favor, but the war was far from over. They had made the Council bleed, but now it was up to them to finish what they had started. Emily Carson stood beside Sullivan, staring at the stars. We can win this, she said, her voice resolute. We just have to keep them on the back foot. They've underestimated us, but they won't for long. We can take this galaxy. Sullivan nodded. We're just getting started. The human warship was no longer just a symbol of resistance. It was now a symbol of defiance, a beacon to the galaxy that humanity would not be defeated. The war had only begun, but the Galactic Council's grip on the universe was beginning to slip. Humanity had struck a blow they couldn't ignore, and the fight was far from over. The damage done to the Galactic Council's fleet was significant, but the victory felt hollow. The silence that followed the explosion of the last of the alien ships was deafening. The human warship hovered in the cold, empty void of space, its crew uncertain about what came next. The tension in the command room was thick. Everyone knew that although they had won a major battle, the war was far from over. Captain Sullivan stood at the front of the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the remains of the alien fleet. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had fought hard, and the Council had taken a brutal hit, but there were still thousands of ships out there. Thousands of soldiers who were now all too aware of humanity's unexpected power. "Report," Sullivan ordered, his voice cutting through the silence. Dr. Emily Carson, his trusted scientist and strategist, stepped forward. Her face was a mix of exhaustion and determination, her eyes scanning the data from the battle. "We've inflicted significant damage," she said, her voice steady but low. "Their ships are retreating to regroup, but they've already sent word to their allies across the galaxy. This is far from over." "We can't afford to rest," Captain Sullivan muttered, running his hand through his hair. "We need to keep the pressure on them, but we have to prepare for their retaliation. They're not going to let this go." Emily nodded, already thinking ahead. "We can use their own arrogance against them. We've shown them that we're capable of striking back, and now they'll be forced to think carefully about their next move. They'll never look at us the same way again." Sullivan's eyes hardened. "That's the only advantage we have right now, surprise. We need to strike before they can rebuild their forces. We can't wait for them to regroup, or they'll come back even stronger." As the human fleet prepared for their next move, the message from the Galactic Council began to come through, loud and clear. The Council was not one to back down from defeat. They had a reputation to uphold, and they would stop at nothing to crush the threat humanity posed. "Captain," the communication officer called from the back of the room. "We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council." Sullivan turned around, his eyes narrowing. He knew this would come. The Council had to respond. The screen flickered to life, showing the face of a high-ranking Council member, a being with multiple eyes, slick skin, and an air of superiority that practically radiated off of them. The alien's voice came through, cold and unwavering. "You humans have proven to be more troublesome than anticipated," the Council member said. "But this war is far from over. Your pathetic attempt to defend your pathetic planet has only delayed the inevitable. We will destroy you, and every last human will be wiped from existence." The message ended as quickly as it began, leaving a haunting silence in its wake. Sullivan stood still for a moment, his jaw clenched. He knew this was just the beginning. The Council's pride was wounded, and they would stop at nothing to make humanity pay. But he wasn't afraid. In fact, that message only steeled his resolve further. "We're not backing down," he said, his voice hard and unwavering. "They think they can intimidate us with threats, but they don't know what they're up against." Emily stepped forward, her face grim. "They're desperate, Captain. They've seen the potential of humanity. Now they'll do everything they can to break us. We need to be smarter. We can't just charge in blindly." Sullivan nodded. "I know, but we have to strike before they can regroup. We hit them fast and hard. We show them that no matter how many ships they have, no matter how powerful they think they are, we will not bend. We will not break." The crew moved with newfound urgency as Sullivan and Emily began making plans for their next move. The Council had underestimated humanity before, and now the entire galaxy would know just how wrong they were. But the upcoming battle would be even more dangerous. The stakes were higher than ever. As the warship prepared to leave for the next conflict, Sullivan took one last look at Earth, his home. He wasn't just fighting for victory. He was fighting for humanity's very existence. The war wasn't over, and the road ahead would be filled with hardship. But one thing was clear. Humanity was ready for whatever the Council threw at them. Back on the warship, the crew stood tall, unwavering. The humans had shown their strength, and now the galaxy would feel their fury. The battle was far from over, but humanity had proven it was more than capable of holding its ground. As the warship disappeared into the void of space, ready for its next confrontation, one thing was certain. Humanity would never back down, no matter what. The tension was palpable. After the surprising and unexpected success of the first attack, The human fleet had returned to Earth, but the peace was fragile, like a thin sheet of ice over a vast and freezing lake. Every moment felt like the calm before the storm. Captain Sullivan stood at the helm of his warship, eyes fixed on the distant horizon of Earth below, his mind racing. The message from the Galactic Council had been clear. They were not backing down. They were coming, and they were coming in force. His crew was at work, preparing for what might be humanity's most dangerous battle yet. It was no longer just about defending Earth. It was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity would never surrender, no matter the odds. Captain. Emily's voice broke through his thoughts. She was standing by the communications console, a worried look on her face. We've intercepted some transmissions from their fleet. They're massing their forces, readying for a full-scale assault. Sullivan's gaze hardened. How soon? Within the next 24 hours, Emily replied. They're bringing everything they have. Thousands of ships, some we've never seen before. They're gearing up for a war unlike any we've ever faced. The crew worked tirelessly in the hours that followed, knowing full well that this was no longer a mere skirmish. Earth was on the brink of total destruction, and humanity's survival depended on their ability to outsmart and outfight an enemy far superior in numbers, technology, and experience. The thought was chilling, but it also ignited something deep within each person. They knew they couldn't afford to lose. The war had taken a personal turn now, and every human on board the ship felt it. Sullivan stood at the front of the bridge, his back straight, his hands clasped firmly behind him. He knew the Galactic Council underestimated humanity, and that was their biggest mistake. Now, the question was, could they strike fast enough to neutralize the threat before it became an unstoppable force? Report, he ordered, his voice cold. The weapons officer, Lieutenant Harris, spoke up first. We've been calibrating the new weapon systems. We've increased output, but it will take all our firepower to even dent their fleet. We're ready, sir, but it won't be easy. Understood, Sullivan replied, his jaw tight. How long before we can launch our counteroffensive? We're good to go in 12 hours, Lieutenant Harris answered, tapping away at the controls. We'll be ready. Captain Sullivan nodded. He had no doubt in his mind that they could hold their ground, but the uncertainty of what was coming next made every plan feel fragile. They would be facing their greatest challenge yet, and every second counted. Across the ship, the crew worked with tireless energy. The scientists, engineers, and technicians were collaborating at every level to ensure the warship was in top condition for the battle. Even the slightest malfunction could spell the end, so every system, every piece of technology, was given the utmost attention. Back on Earth, the situation was becoming more tense by the minute. News reports were flooded with talk of the alien invasion, and governments around the world were scrambling to prepare. Panic spread across nations as the reality of the war set in. Humanity was not just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for their very existence. The sky above Earth had become a swirling mass of shifting colors. The gravitational pull from the incoming alien fleet distorted the very atmosphere. It was as if the universe itself was preparing for the epic battle about to unfold. Emily walked over to Sullivan, a worried expression on her face. We know what they're capable of, Captain, but we don't know the full extent of their forces. What if we're not ready? What if they overwhelm us? Sullivan turned to face her, his eyes filled with determination. We've already beaten them once. That was the first time they ever had to fear humanity. They won't be able to ignore us now. We might be outnumbered, but we have something they'll never understand. We fight because we have to, because we have no other choice. And that's what makes us stronger. Emily smiled faintly, though the fear still lingered. You always know what to say, Captain. But I think the real question is, are we ready to give everything? Because the next battle will decide it all. Sullivan's face darkened as he turned to look at Earth below. He knew Emily was right. The stakes couldn't be higher. Humanity had come so far, and now it was time to face the true test. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future. "I've never been more ready," he said, his voice resolute. The crew gathered, each person in their place, preparing for the unimaginable. Outside, the sky crackled with energy as the first signs of the enemy fleet began to emerge. The time for hiding was over. The humans would fight back with everything they had, and the Galactic Council would learn a lesson they would never forget. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Sullivan gave the final order. "Prepare for battle." The warship's engines roared to life, and with that, the fate of humanity was sealed. As the darkness of space closed in around them, the human fleet readied itself for the fight of their lives. The storm was coming, and humanity was ready to meet it head-on. The time had come. The entire galaxy held its breath as humanity prepared to face the wrath of the Galactic Council. Earth, once thought weak and insignificant, was now the stage for the greatest conflict the galaxy had ever witnessed. The human warship, sleek and imposing, stood ready in the vastness of space, surrounded by a fleet of Earth's finest ships. But this was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything humanity stood for. Captain Sullivan stood in the command center, eyes sharp as he scanned the battlefield. The enemy fleet was enormous, stretching across the stars like a dark cloud. They were ruthless, cold, and calculated. But Sullivan knew they were facing something they had never faced before. Humanity, with its unbreakable spirit and relentless will to survive, was not going down without a fight. "Ready the weapons," Sullivan commanded, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "Prepare for full engagement. No holding back." A tense silence fell over the bridge as his crew scrambled to make final preparations. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. The enemy fleet was advancing, and the time for hesitation had passed. The fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested in their hands. On the surface of Earth, panic had reached a fever pitch. Governments and leaders were coordinating their final defenses, knowing full well that the outcome of the battle could change everything. Humanity had no allies to call upon, no one to help them, but they had something more powerful than any army: their unwavering determination. As Sullivan's warship prepared to move into position, a strange sense of calm washed over him. He had been in countless battles, but this was different. This was more than just another mission. It was personal. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. "Captain," Emily's voice came through his earpiece, breaking his thoughts. "The enemy is within range. They're starting to charge their weapons." Sullivan's grip tightened on the armrest. "We're not letting them fire first. Ready our counterattack." The tension on the bridge was palpable. Every officer, every crew member knew this was the final stand. This was the moment where they either lived or died, where the fate of Earth would be decided. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. Now it was time to see if all their efforts were enough. The first shots from the enemy fleet rang out, massive beams of energy that tore through the blackness of space. The human fleet dodged, returning fire with everything they had. The warship's cannons lit up, sending powerful blasts towards the alien ships. Each shot was a message. Humanity would not be crushed. The battle raged on, an unrelenting storm of explosions and energy. The human fleet moved with precision, coordinated by every officer on board, each person playing their part to perfection. But it was clear that they were outnumbered. The enemy ships kept coming, their relentless advance pushing humanity to its limits. Captain Sullivan's hands gripped the console tightly as the damage reports came in. The warship had taken a hit. The shields were holding, but barely. They needed to end this, and they needed to end it fast. "We're running out of time," Emily said, her voice laced with concern. "They're closing in." "Prepare the final strike," Sullivan ordered. "All hands, get ready for the main assault." In that moment, Sullivan knew there was no turning back. They had one shot, and it had to count. Humanity's fate rested on this one final move. The enemy had come to wipe them out, but they had underestimated the tenacity of human spirit. The human fleet rallied together, pulling into formation for a final, all-out attack. Sullivan's warship surged forward, cutting through space with unparalleled speed. The cannons roared as they unleashed a barrage of firepower that struck directly at the heart of the enemy fleet. It was a desperate move, one that could either secure humanity's survival or lead to their destruction. But as the fire from the human fleet collided with the alien ships, the Galactic Council's forces faltered. Their shields were no match for the sheer force of humanity's retaliation. Then something unexpected happened. A large section of the enemy fleet began to break apart. The front lines, once thought impenetrable, started to crumble under the pressure of the human onslaught. The alien warlords, who had once believed they were invincible, were beginning to realize the full extent of their mistake. "Captain, it's working," Emily shouted over the comms. "They're retreating." Sullivan allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They were winning. The tide had turned in humanity's favor. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. As the enemy fleet began to scatter, some ships held their ground. They were more formidable than the rest, and they weren't retreating. They were preparing for a last-ditch attack. "Brace for impact," Sullivan shouted. The final wave of enemy ships surged forward, their weapons blazing with deadly intent. But humanity was ready. They fought with every ounce of strength they had, pushing forward with the fire of survival burning in their hearts. The warship's weapons fired again, and this time, they didn't stop until every last enemy ship was either destroyed or in retreat. The enemy had been defeated. The battle was over. Humanity had won. Sullivan stood tall, watching as the last of the enemy fleet disappeared into the darkness of space. It was a hard-earned victory, one that came at a great cost. But Earth had survived. Humanity had proven its worth. And the galaxy would never forget the day they learned just how powerful the human spirit could be. As the crew of the warship celebrated their victory, Sullivan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had faced impossible odds and had come out on top. The Galactic Council, once thought invincible, had been defeated. And Earth had proven, once and for all, that no one, not even the mightiest empire in the galaxy, could stand against humanity's will to survive. The battle was over, but the story of humanity's triumph was just beginning.